This is Finance Dissected. I will be explaining the key points of the 2024 UK autumn budget, how it affects every class of work, like the employees, employers, investors, and so on. Rachel Reeves says the UK voted for change, and the Labour government has a mandate for a decade of national renewal. So because of this, difficult decisions will be made. Reeves pledges more pounds in people's pockets and improved living standards. The only way to drive economic growth is to invest, invest, invest. Reeves added this budget will raise taxes by £40 billion. And panic, you are not paying this alone. Stay till the end. Any of this amount might not even be applicable to you. Without wasting more time, follow as we do the breakdown. Firstly, let's talk of national insurance. Employees will not pay more directly, but she will raise employers' national insurance contributions by 1.2 percentage points to 15% from April 2025. The government will also reduce a secondary threshold when contributions are due from £9,100 to £5,000. Those measures will raise £25 billion a year by the end of the forecast period, the biggest single tax-raising measure in the budget. This is the big fiscal hitter of the budget, £25 billion a year by the end of the Parliament. There is no doubt that public services need the extra money, and voters want better public services. Note, there is no increase to employees' national insurance. The class affected by this are the employers. As an employer, don't cry yet, you are not paying the £25 billion alone. Stay till the end, you might see what will make you instead. Next we talk about income tax. I know this is what most people want to know about. Reeves says the government will increase personal tax thresholds on income tax and national insurance in line with inflation from 2028 to 29, something that had been floated as a possibility. This avoids dragging people into higher tax bands. Note, on the statement she stated for now there wouldn't be any increase on the income tax, but there will be from 2028 to 2029, and this will be in line with the inflation. Let's move to capital gains and inheritance tax. Capital gains tax will be increased. The lower rate will be raised from 10% to 18%, and the higher rate from 20% to 24%. There will, however, be no increase on the 18% and 24% capital gains rate imposed on the sale of second homes. The government will extend a freeze on the threshold for inheritance tax to 2030, allowing £325,000 to be inherited tax-free. From 2027, inherited pension pots will also be subject to the tax. Reliefs will be reformed for business and agricultural assets. After £1 million, those assets will attract inheritance tax of 20%. She mentioned she is keeping the rate low in accordance with international standards. It will raise a relatively modest £2.5 billion by the end of the Parliament. On inheritance tax, she has largely closed loopholes connected to farms, but even this and other tweaks will raise an eventual £2 billion a year. Next is the minimum wage. This part is very important to a lot of people, so listen as I break it down. Reeves confirms that the national living wage, the legal minimum for over 21s, will increase by 6.7% to £12.21, equivalent to £1,400 a year for an eligible full-time worker. There will be a single adult rate phased in over time to eventually equal lease pay for under 21s. As you can see, there will be an increase in employees' wages, which from my view will make a lot of employees support the budget. But the employers will definitely be cry, which will lead to cut in employment. And remember, from employers are already affected by the increase on the national insurance. Then we move to tobacco and alcohol. The government will implement a levy on vapes, which will be increased in line with tobacco. Tobacco taxes will rise by 2% above retail prices index RPI measure of inflation for the rest of this Parliament, and tax on hand-rolling tobacco will increase by 10%. Taxes on alcohol will rise in line with the RPI, but Reeves announces a cut in draft duty by 1.7%, which she says is a penny off a pint in the pub. This is not a surprise, as the government has been moving the motion to ban smoking. So what about fuel duty? Reeves says increasing fuel duty next year would be wrong, so she extends the freeze for a year and maintains the last government's 5p cut. Fuel duty was frozen between 2011 and 2022 and cut by 5p in March 2022 after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Let's talk about private school fees that will be brought in on private school fees from January 2025. She suggested hence around 94% attend state schools, so public school needs more funding. On the issues of school and education, Reeves says the Department for Education will receive £6.7 billion of capital investment, a 19% real terms increase. That includes £1.4 billion to rebuild more than 500 schools in the greatest need. The school's budget will increase by £2.3 billion to support the hiring of teachers. There will be £2.1 billion for school maintenance, a £300 million increase. Reeves announces a £1 billion increase in funding for special educational needs. There will be another £300 million for higher education on NHS. Reeves promises a 10-year plan for the NHS in the spring, targeting 2% productivity growth next year. She announces a £22.6 billion increase in the day-to-day health budget and £3.1 billion increase in the capital budget. That includes £1 billion for repairs and upgrades and £1.5 billion for new beds in hospitals and testing capacity. On housing, the government will spend £5 billion on housing investment in 2025-26, including increasing the supply of affordable housing. The government will reduce right to buy discounts, and local governments will retain their earnings from council housing sales to allow them to reinvest. The government will hire hundreds of new planning officers to accelerate house building. Next is on the transportation. Reeves commits to the Trans-Pennine route upgrade, improving capacity at Manchester Victoria and electrifying the Wigan to Bolton route. She also promises to support east-west rail links between Oxford and Cambridge. Reeves confirms the government will fund tunneling of HS2 to London Euston. There will be a £500 million increase in the roads budget next year to target potholes. We are not talking about the full HS2. I bet they knew the voters will love this because every voter is interested in potholes on energy. Reeves announces £3.4 billion for the Warm Homes Plan to upgrade buildings, lowering energy bills. The government will fund Great British Energy, a new body to be based in Aberdeen. On public spending, there will be a 1.5% increase in real spending on government departments, and 1.7% when including capital spending. On defense, Reeves announces a £2.9 billion increase in military spending next year, as well as funding for Second World War commemorations next year. On local government, there will be £1.3 billion for additional grant funding for local government, including £600 million for social care. Greater Manchester and the West Midlands will get integrated settlements next year, allowing them to take more control of their spending. Public investment. Reeves says more public investment is needed in the UK. A new rule will target debt falling as a share of the economy. She confirms that debt will be measured as public sector net financial liabilities, recognizing benefits from investments. The rule will apply in 2029-30, and then net financial debt will fall by the third year of every forecast. There will be regular reports on government investments from the Office for Budget Responsibility (OBR). She says the government will invest £1 billion in aerospace, £2 billion in automotive to support electric vehicles, and £500 million for life sciences. Government research and development spending will reach £20.4 billion in 2025-26, including £6.1 billion in sectors such as engineering, biotechnology, and medical science. Planes and private jets air passenger duty will increase by up to £2 for each economy short-haul flight, Reeves says. Private jets will attract an extra 50% air passenger duty, up to £450 per passenger for a flight. Business taxes and non-DOMs. The government will introduce permanently lower business rates for retail, hospitality, and leisure businesses from 2026 to 27. Until then, they will receive 40% relief on business rates up to a cap of £110,000. Employment allowance will be increased from £5,000 to £10,500, reducing national insurance for smaller businesses. Taxes on carried interest, generally paid by private equity managers, will rise from 28% to 32% from April. Reeves confirms the oil profits levy will be increased to 38% and extended. The concept of non-domicile residence will be abolished from April. Compensation schemes. Reeves says the government will compensate victims of the infected blood scandal with £11.8 billion, and there will be another £1.8 billion for victims of the Post Office Horizon IT scandal. Other measures. Reeves says the government will raise £6.5 billion through targeting tax avoidance, including by umbrella companies, OBR. Reeves says Labour inherited a £22 billion black hole with allegedly unfunded pledges by the Conservative government. The OBR, the government's budget watchdog, has published a review saying that the previous government did not disclose details of spending. Those details would have made forecasts materially different, Reeves says. Reeves says the government will implement 10 recommendations from the OBR's review. Inflation and growth forecasts. The Chancellor will maintain the Bank of England's 2% target for inflation. Inflation will average 2.5% in 2024, rising to 2.6% in 2025, before gradually dropping to 2% in 2029, according to. Inflation was at 1.7% in September, below the Bank of England's 2% target, and down from 11% in October 2022. The OBR slightly upgrades its growth forecast for this year and next, but adjusts them down in later years. GDP growth is forecast to be 1.1% in 2024, then 2%, 1.8%, 1.5%, 1.5%, and 1.6% in 2030, Reeves says. At the spring budget under the then Conservative Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, the OBR had forecast 0.8% growth this year, 1.9% in 2025, and 2% in 2026. Government borrowing. Reeves announces new rules to not borrow for day-to-day spending. The current budget will be balanced within 3 years of forecasts. The government will run a deficit of £26.2 billion in 2026, but will achieve a surplus of £10.9 billion in 2027 to 28, £9.3 billion in 2028 to 29, and £9.9 billion in 2029 to 30. Public sector net debt will fall from £127 billion in 2024 to 25, falling gradually to £70.6 billion by 2029 to 20. Closing remarks. Reeves says it is a moment of fundamental choice for the UK. She says the government will protect the NHS, protect working people, and rebuild Britain. She says the Conservatives must say what choices they would make if they disagree with her decisions. They would have to cut schools and hospitals if they disagree with any tax increases. If there is any part of this breakdown you're not clear about, please drop it at the comments section or get in touch with me. Again, this is Finance Dissected. Please subscribe for more content. See you on the next video.